Well, we are very fortunate now to welcome to XEP the game director of Obsidian Entertainment, Avowed, Carrie Patel. Welcome, and how are you?
Thank you so much. I'm excited, delighted to be here, and really thrilled about sharing Avowed with people.
I'm thrilled for you to share Avowed. I have been long since looking forward to this game, and it has been a wonderful journey during the review process thus far. I appreciate you taking the time to be here, and we've got a small amount of time, so I'm going to pick your brain. I hope you're ready for it.
All right, let's go.
Uh, with roughly 20 some odd hours into my experience, I find myself getting lost into this world in the best of ways. And it's really unique for me because I approach never having played an Obsidian game, if you can believe it.
Oh,
So this has been just an absolute joy. And I'm sure people are eye rolling hard here. I wanted to ask you, though, about the intended gameplay loop that you guys have here. Uh, with Avowed, I find myself getting lost, exploring, going after enemies. There are dialogue quests that just take me back. What was Obsidian and your vision for the gameplay loop of this game?
so the wonderful thing about the kinds of RPGs that we make at Obsidian is that you can really craft the kind of experience you want to have.
Mhm,
And that means both from kind of opting into your focus around exploration, combat, and dialogue.
mhm,
For players who love character, who love the story content, there are rich and deep conversations that you can have with all of your companion characters to get to know them to a degree that I don't think we've done yet in any of our previous games.
mhm.
For players who want to explore and get to know the world, the design teams have done an incredible job at laying out these regions and levels, creating lots of little nooks and secrets for players to explore and get lost in. And the gameplay team has done an incredible job with our combat. So, my hope is that players step into Avowed ready to explore and experiment and find their fun.
Mhm.
That means try new weapons, pick up new things, maybe do a respec early in the game, but get lost in a map, find things that engage your curiosity, and go check them out. The team's done a wonderful job at hand placing encounters, loot, and little bits of found storytelling to reward all of that curiosity.
You kind of hit the nail on the head for several things that have been a part of my experience in these opening 20 hours. Respecking being one of them. You guys made it very approachable to respec and rebuild and adjust my gameplay experience. Was that a core pillar from the beginning?
So because we're giving players a classless system, it's only fair to let players try out powers before they're fully committed to them.
Mhm,
So for us, allowing respecking, having a pretty flexible gear progression and upgrade system,
mhm.
not locking the player into particular build styles or weapon loadouts. All of that is really geared about letting players experiment and define their preferred play style as they move through the game.
I would imagine then that creating this world to accommodate those different play styles, to accommodate changing your play styles, whether you want to go gameplay heavy, traversal, combat, has to be a challenge in and of itself because you have a narrative to tell, but the living lands already existed. So can you talk to me about balancing those elements?
Yeah, so creating the kinds of RPGs that we do, one thing we're very accustomed to is understanding that players are going to opt in and out of certain features and certain pieces of your content to differing degrees.
Mhm,
And so, with any story element, with any sort of crit path progression, we're always thinking about what is the bare minimum that players need to know and understand in order to move through. What's that gold tier lore, information, story? And then what's the stuff that we can layer in for players who want to dig into it?
mhm.
So, we expect and encourage that players are going to encounter content out of order. They might, in some cases, find the dungeon in the foozle before they find the quest giver. We write and script our quests in such a way to really account for free form player exploration and experimentation. um, and we build the quests, the characters, and all of these parts of the world in such a way that even if you're not on the crit path in the moment, you're still learning about the world, learning about the conflicts, and really getting immersed in the living lands and the challenges that you're there to deal with through your exploration and through your side questing.
Does that make honing and toning, the difficulty something that you have to really be precise about?
It can be a challenge because we know we're going to have players of a variety of skill levels, a variety of levels of experience with this style of gameplay, and varying appetites for difficulty and for really restrictive resource management. So that's where having a range of difficulty options comes in handy. For players who really just want to have a gentle exploration experience and get into the story, we have story time mode, just as we did on Pillars and Deadfire. And as with Pillars and Deadfire, for players who want a more punishing experience, we have Path of the Damned. So it's
Mhm.
all about offering options.
I will say there were multiple times where my curiosity got the best of me. I followed a shadow into a cave, or I saw a bear just too far out of range, maybe away from my crypt path or not having done enough leveling. And I was like, oh, this is a fight. But one of the most rewarding parts was going back to those places after the fact,
Yes.
having leveled up. That was a joy for me.
That's I think one of the advantages of having a difficulty progression system that does not scale to the player is you can really set up your encounters, place your encounters throughout the world in such a way that you're kind of teasing players with the challenges that are ahead of them and giving them reasons and motivations to upgrade, to continue progressing their character, and to exploring other parts of the world as well.
Certainly so. And kind of the, I guess, juxtaposed experience for me was after great combats or getting to great combats, I was doing more traversal than I expected to. And maybe that's a byproduct of seeing a game in trailers or seeing a game in previews and then getting to play it yourself. But I felt like you guys did a really good job and have really tried to make traversal a thing. I'm climbing ledges, moving around, finding secret nooks and crannies. That has to be fun to create, no?
It really is. And the design team has done an incredible job at taking advantage of our parkour and mantling mechanics in order to create levels and dungeons with a lot of verticality. There's one particularly interesting dungeon later in the game that is basically almost an entirely fully vertical dungeon.
Hmm.
And so having those tools and knowing how the player is going to explore the world really gives us opportunities to create some fun for the player and also just to expand the dimensions in which our world is explorable. Now
Hmm.
you're not just looking left and right, you're also looking up and down. And that just lets us build things out more and more.
Up, down, there were things that like I used party members to clear obstacles and such, and I really just enjoyed that. But I kept going back to I guess two questions that have to do with art design and the creative pivot you guys went through. We can go from first to third person in Avowed, which is that player choice is wonderful, but I'm curious if it brings challenges in terms of crafting that traversal or that combat. And then my follow up would be: was that always there? Or did the creative pivot that you entered into did that change with that process?
So third person was always part of the design for Avowed, in part because this did start as a game with a multiplayer option. So you have
Mhm.
to have third person for your player character and all your characters really. Um, but yeah, that is something we maintained through the creative pivot over the course of the project.
Mhm.
I know for some players, playing in first person can be very challenging, and others just like third person. They like being able to see their character in the world. Now, we still do optimize our levels and our combat for first person.
Mhm.
I think first person. Because that viewpoint can be so much more restrictive, if that is a mode you are offering, it's really important that that is kind of what you're really thinking about when you're looking at player line of sight, when you're
Mhm.
looking at lighting cues, kind of visual design cues that are going to guide the player's eye.
Mhm.
Um, and also when you're looking at the sizing and spacing of enemies, because your visibility is kind of what's in front of you and a little bit to the sides. So accounting for all that certainly includes some challenges. Definitely also on the VFX and animation front.
Mhm.
Many of the player movements and attacks that you're going to see in third person, we essentially did have to craft new animations and sometimes separate VFX for them, because if you're looking at something like a barrier ability, in
Mhm.
third person you can surround the player character. In first person you need to have a window of visibility through that. So
Mhm.
that's just to praise the team and say there's a ton of work that goes into pulling that off.
Mhm. And it really cool. My favorite was just transitioning between the two and comparing. There's like it's kind of a fun little thing to do for sure. I have to ask when you're directing a game like Avowed, I have to feel that the scope of the living lands is so large, and there's already so much lore uh, that when you're trying to keep a project like this in check. Feature creep and size has to be a concern. Did you guys have to put up guardrails rather to keep this scope in check, or was it a comfortable fit?
We certainly assessed and reassessed over the course of production. Kind of as we worked through regions, we assessed kind of what the development cost of those were, what we could afford to scope and build into going forward. So yeah, that kind of assessment and that kind of scope management is an ongoing process for a project like this. But yeah, I think one advantage of the open zone design is that certainly kind of gives you some independent pockets that your team can work in, and it lets you design some of your content with a bit more modularity in mind, which can be very helpful for scoping.
Mm-hmm. You just said the words open zone, and that's a big distinction between open world. How do you settle on which biomes or environments you want to use when you're crafting a narrative and you have the living lands that already has its own kind of story to tell?
Yeah. So one of the key details about the Living Lands, and part of what made it exciting for us as developers, as a setting for Avowed, is the fact that it is defined by so much variety and vibrancy.
Mhm,
It's supposed to be a land of extreme sites, very different landscapes, very different environments, and kind of these larger than life encounters. And so for us, that meant looking for variety. You're going to encounter, kind of some gloomy forests. You're going to encounter high desert. You're going to encounter
mhm,
volcanic wastelands. That meant looking for variety and using that both as a vehicle to show the breadth of the living lands and also kind of complement the tone of the story as it evolves over the course of your journey.
That was really neat to me to see. Each area thus far has been really fascinating because some of the architecture feels like it's perfectly nestled in. Some of it stands out, and it's meant to stand out, it seems.
Mhm.
And it felt like a lot of work went into crafting both the areas, with their natural environments, but also the architecture.
Yeah, yeah, and looking also at how those features stand out in the land as points of interest and draws for the player. And that
Mhm,
in particular is something that we really iterated on over the course of development.
mhm,
Um, we took several passes, for instance, at the specifically the entrance to the Emerald Stair region.
mhm,
And part of what we were optimizing for is obviously, you have a pretty important encounter that happens early on in that region, but also looking at visibility. Like, what are the
mhm,
player's sight lines? As you kind of move up to your initial vista, the two
mhm,
big things you're going to see are the town of Fior on one end and then some distant ruins on the other end. And both of
mhm,
those things kind of stick up out of the environment in a way
mhm,
to preview for the player. These locations are going to be pretty important. You're going to want to check things out. But
mhm,
then as you're moving towards them, you're seeing things like the little market area outside of Fior. You're seeing a big old ranger tower on the other side of the map.
mhm,
Designing an RPG like this is all about giving players constant choices, not just in their dialogue, not just in quest resolution, but also in their moment to moment exploration. You're not exploring this flat expanse, we're giving you points of interest to explore, little details to engage your curiosity, little ways that the land kind of interrupts your path and kind of
mhm.
pushes you along one fork or the other.
Two more questions before I get you out of here. One of the things I've taken note of in your interviews is that there is a point of no return in our story, and I have not gotten there yet. But that players cannot go back after that PNR. Is the aim for players to have multiple playthroughs versus a new game plus approach?
Yeah, I think if players find that there's more that they want to do in the world with their current character and their current playthrough, that point of no return is a signal and a save point where you can still go back to previous regions, other parts of the game, and clean up anything you haven't done yet.
Mhm,
But I think what's really going to be rewarding for players is getting through the end game and then trying a new character with a new build, a new set of choices, and just a new approach to the competing demands of Adir and the Living Lands and some of the more mysterious characters that you encounter.
I love it. I love it. My final question for you, Carrie, is not a fair question, and I know
Mhm.
that, and I ask it of everybody that comes on XEP. Are you happy with the game?
I am. I really, really am. The obviously when you've been with something in development, it is impossible not to look at it through the lens of kind of the process that got you there, and the opportunities you had to miss and the things you wish you'd done more of. But honestly, the most rewarding thing has been in the past couple of weeks. As a team, we've been playing through the game, playing, checking for balance, checking for bugs, just spending time in the build one more time. And a thing I have heard across the team that has been so rewarding is I'm having a lot of fun. Like,
Mhm.
I have worked on this game for years. I have worked on this specific area, this region, and I'm finding stuff I didn't know was there. I'm finding choices and options that I didn't realize we were offering. I'm getting to the end game and I'm seeing how all of my decisions are coming together, and I'm really invested in my playthrough and my build, and I'm having fun with it. And at the end of the day, like, that's what we're trying to bring players is fun, an immersive story, and a world that really reacts around them.
I'm thrilled to hear you say that. It brings me such joy to hear you get to talk about your game in such a way. And I will confess that you were among my uh, most hopeful interviews of any. I've long since wanted to speak to you, so I am greatly appreciative of your time. And I hope people enjoy Avowed. It's such a great time.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Luke. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to be it for us at XEP. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care.